I want to say something on the front end. This is the first time in over 20 years that I've relied on notes. However, time marches on and my failing memory left me way back there somewhere in the dust. I no longer have any choice but to rely on notes. My advice to all of you is work hard, figure out how to learn your speech and deliver a speech. Don't read a speech like I'm going to do now. So don't use me now as your idea of how to do things properly. But with that said, thanks for that gracious introduction, Brian. I may be new to this club, but I'm a long-time Toastmaster. I was born in Central Alabama, grew up on our family's farm in Central Alabama that had been in the family since shortly after the Civil War. Now, you're going to know me as nothing more than a South Alabama country boy. That's who I am at my core. That's what made me. That's what gave me the values that I hold dear. And I can never be anything else or I would be a liar. My parents taught me those values, and you better believe when my dad told me to do something, this old country boy knew he'd better do it. I'd watched my parents struggle to put my older brother through Auburn. I decided there's no way I was going to do that. Now, for whatever reason, from the time I was a tiny little boy, I knew I was going to the University of Alabama. I don't know how I knew it, I just knew it. So when I graduated high school, and I made it a point to figure out how to use part-time jobs, summer jobs, whatever it might be, to work my way through the University of Alabama without having to be in my dad's pocket. If I was a man, it's time for me to get out of his pocket. I thought, dumb as I am, that the sun rose and set in California. And somehow I just had to be there. So that's what I did, and that was a mistake. Took me a while to figure that out. By this time, I was married, had a daughter, and I realized I needed to be back east, closer to my now aging parents. And so we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was fortunate. I was able to get hired at a bank called North Carolina National Bank, better known as NCNB, which now is better known as Bank of America. Over the time, I became a part of what they call their transition team. Now, at the time, the economy was changing dramatically, and banks were failing left and right, something that had not occurred since the 20s. Because of our size and our stability, which was through the wisdom of the board of directors at NCNB, we tended to be the bigger banks, one of the bigger banks. And as time went on, we got to be the bigger and bigger and bigger until we were one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the country. Banks continued to fail. We continue to be the bank that the Fed would go to and say, we need you to take this thing on. Whether we wanted them or not, many times the Fed told us, you're taking this one on. I was part of the group that married those two together, figuring out how to make their systems talk to each other, figuring out how to make their processes work together. And that's what I was doing for a long time until we acquired a bank in Florida, the biggest bank in Florida. And it just so happened that when I came down, I found there was this feisty little redhead that worked in an office on the same floor as my office. And it just so happened that I had met her when she was in Charlotte as well, and she had been recently hired to this bank. And we got together, and we spent a lot of time together, and we began dating, and that's my wife, Linda, which is the best thing that ever happened to this whole country boy. So time went on. We continued to acquire more banks, and then my wife of many years before had passed away long before I came down here. I had a daughter. She was now grown and gone. I had nothing that was holding me back. And I spent a lot of time on the road. I spent a lot of time in Texas, bringing their banks into our system. I spent a lot of time in other places. And finally, it was the biggest of the biggest of the biggest of the biggest, and the countrywide mortgage meltdown occurred, and it just about crashed the entire U.S. economy. And I was part of the group that was sent in to figure out how to fix that. Now, in the midst of all of this, I'm learning all these things, but I'm also learning a lot about Toastmasters. And I managed to become involved in the leadership of our district within Toastmasters, which, by the way, at the time was the biggest district in the world. And the longtime members were extremely proud of that fact, as they should have been. However, the problem was there were a lot of things they did that just weren't quite right. And I took issue with that. I was taught to be honest. How can we be the biggest in the world if we're not the best in the world? And I'd rather be the best than be the biggest. And so that discussion took place within the leadership of the district, and ultimately I was elected as the first district governor, which is what the term was at the time, for District 84, which is the district we have now. Because of that, and because of the work that I did with it, I was ultimately elected to the Toastmasters International Board of Directors, where I served a 2-year term with them. Over the time, I've had a lot of opportunities, I've had a lot of experiences, I've enjoyed it, and along the way, this thing somehow got in my head that just won't let me go, and I know that it's going to take me down if something else doesn't do it first. But I'm going to tell you now, I'm a South Alabama by God country boy. I'm going to go down fighting, scratching, kicking, and clawing. It'll take me, I know it will, but my God, it's going to have a fight on its hands to do it. That's why I stay involved like this today. That, ladies and gentlemen, is me, and that's my story. Mr. Toastmaster.
Awesome job, Greg. Thank you.